We're 24 hours away from a vote that could forever change Europe. Hello and welcome to this Bloomberg Quint Facebook special on Brexit. Now tomorrow, the Brits will go out to vote on whether to stay in the EU or not. And the world over, businesses and governments will be watching this with bated breath. If Britain does exit the EU, this will have an India impact, and we're going to focus on that throughout the course of this show. But first, here's the why, when and how of Brexit.
The European Union is an economic and political union of European countries and currently has 28 member countries. But when it first started in 1958, it was known as the European Economic Community and had just 6 member countries. The UK officially joined the EEC in 1973 along with Denmark and Ireland. A majority of British citizens were in favour of joining the EEC when UK held its first referendum in 1975. And in 1986, UK assumed presidency of the EEC. In 1992, the EEC was officially renamed the European Union. 7 years later, all but 9 EU countries decided to use a common currency, the euro. UK was one of the 9, it stuck with the sterling pound. By 2013, the European Union had 28 members with many more vying for entry. But in UK, citizens were rallying to exit the EU. The rising popularity of the UK Independent Party and its focus on EU's high membership fees, immigration policies and stringent regulation prompted David Cameron to promise a referendum. Cameron won the 2014 election and had a promise to fulfill. In February 2016, he set a date for a referendum.
So that's basically how #Brexit started trending the world over. But what if Britain actually exits the EU? Will that have a collateral impact on the global economy?
Yes, definitely. There will be a lot of volatility. There'll be a big impact on the UK and in the EU as well, because a lot of the other countries in the EU that are unhappy about certain things may want to make a similar move, and that could be a very disastrous situation for Europe in general. So I think this is something to watch very, very carefully. It could have global repercussions.
If you were to switch on your television or log on to Facebook or Twitter, you'd find out that everyone's talking about a Brexit. Now, obviously, a Brexit could have a serious impact on a country closer to the UK, say Ireland. But should India really care about a referendum being held 7,000 kilometers away? Did you know that there are over 800 Indian companies in the UK that employ 110,000 people? And the top fastest growing ones generate over £26 billion of turnover.
The experts and the data providers say that even the talk of the referendum has already created a fair amount of uncertainty amongst the global business community that M&A deals with. And the most recent data suggests that UK facing M&A volumes have dropped by almost 40% in the last 3 or 4 months.
Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry believes that not only does the prospect of a Brexit create uncertainty, but it could also adversely impact investments and movement of professionals to the UK. Companies in the UK will need to do some serious contingency planning if Britain was to exit the EU. For example, an Indian company like Tata Motors has its largest subsidiary in the UK, Jaguar Land Rover. To give you a sense of how vital Jaguar Land Rover is to Tata Motors, JLR contributes around 90% of Tata Motors' operational profit. As for Jaguar Land Rover, more than a quarter of its sales come from Europe. Some lawyers say that if a Brexit were to happen, then such a company may need to rethink its European strategy altogether. It might consider relocating its assembly plant to another EU country so that it can continue enjoying tariff benefits. If a Brexit were to happen, it could impact such a company's profits in a huge way.
In terms of a Brexit, when we're talking about an India impact, for example, an Indian company with a massive subsidiary in the UK, would it impact a company such as that?
It would depend a lot on whether that subsidiary is doing a lot of business in the Eurozone or not. because where you'll actually wind up with significant repercussions would be if there were the erection of tariff barriers all of a sudden, and if the main market for that company happened to be Europe, which is the case, by the way, for a lot of the financial services companies and indeed the exporters in the UK as well. Those are all questions which will arise.
Now, it's not just a company like Tata Motors which would be impacted by a possible Brexit. There'd be several such Indian companies because, after all, India is the UK's third largest source of foreign direct investment. So my colleague Somit Sarkar sat down and identified those major Indian companies with a large revenue exposure to Europe. And he found out that Tata Steel, Cox & Kings, Marks & Swarma and Bharat Forge earn close to 50% of their revenue from Europe. For others like Wockhardt, Apollo Tyres, TCS, HCL, Tata Motors and Mindtree, the Europe contribution hovers between 20 to 30%. In his research, Somit also points out how the stock prices of 5 major Indian companies have taken a hit whenever the polls suggested that the Leave camp is in the lead. So the real question is, will a Brexit impact India's equity and currency markets?
Well, Brexit will definitely have sentimental impact on markets as well as currency as we move closer to the event. But beyond that, I think the medium to long term impact is, well, it's still unknown, and a lot of it will depend on how it impacts the currency, namely pound, and also how it impacts the dollar vis-a-vis rupee. On the other hand, in terms of companies which have exposure to UK as well as EU, because let's not forget that UK is the gateway to Europe, and to that extent Indian companies which have operations in UK will get impacted, because migration of labor will definitely have will get impacted once trade and non-trade barriers are put in place.
So if Britain leaves, India will hurt too. That's why I asked Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Vikas Swarup for his views, and here's what he had to say. The whole world is talking about Britain exiting the EU. Just generally speaking, sir, do you think this could impact MNCs and Indian companies at all?
Well, certainly we are looking at it very closely, and Prime Minister has made one comment which I can repeat. He has said we have always seen Britain as our gateway to Europe. So let's await what happens on the 23rd of June.
Now, if opinion polls are anything to go by, then the Leave campaign has gained a lot of ground in the last few days. Take today's Bloomberg Composite poll tracker, for instance, which suggests that 44% of the people polled would want Britain to exit the EU, while 45% of them would rather stay in the EU. The rest are obviously undecided, so it's quite neck and neck there. It's interesting that there's just 24 hours to go and the world is making its views heard on social media.